Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Are we excited to be in Barcelona? Yay! It's one of my favorite cities in the world. So I'm really, really excited that all of you are here today because we have an amazing panel. We have an amazing two keynote speakers. This is how popular the Smart City Expo is. It's a third day and everyone is still very enthusiastic. Everyone wants to come and speak and share their best models, their best practices. What we are trying to do here as well is to be able to learn from each other, is to be able to say in next year or the next decade what we actually learned, what we actually can do, what didn't work, because it's really important for us to understand what doesn't work in order for us to be able to learn from each other's mistakes. My abuelita always said, con una luz nadie se pierde. That means with a little bit of light, we can actually find our way. And so that light, that knowledge, that information is so important. And within that, the information has created the fourth industrial revolution, which is what our panel and our keynote speakers are going to be addressing today. So let's see. If we have a little bit of time at the end, I know that our moderator will be conducting the panel and the questions, and we'll try and have some discussion, a little bit of questions, and hopefully some great answers. But please make sure to connect with the folks up here. Make sure that you can get their information, email. I know that within the expo, everyone can actually be able to reach out to them. So make a point of, I always tell all my staff and all my teams, if you go to a dinner, if you go to an event and you don't come back with at least 20 cards, then I don't know what you were doing. So it's important for us to be able to connect and make sure that we all, again, learn from each other. Today we're going to, when we talk about the fourth revolution, we've been experiencing many revolutions, and I like to call it our innovation revolution in a way, because communication, information, data, today is valuable, can create so many significant changes at the same time as it could create certain challenges, right? Not all information is being used in the best and most appropriate way. I'm very proud of the fact that the EU has been able to look at GDPR and started that pathway towards understanding what are our rights as citizens, our rights to privacy and our rights to our own data. At the same time, we have to figure out not to overregulate, not to create more obstacles, but to be able to create the ecosystems for the private sector and the public sector to come together and work together to create more entrepreneurship. I'll give you a little bit of an example. I used to work for President Barack Obama, and we came in during the worst recession we've had in over 100 years. And coming into a government that had legacy systems, into a government that really was trying to figure out better ways for us to help small businesses, to help communities come together and be able to create more companies. Over 50% of the jobs that were created came out of small businesses, came out of the ideas, came out of innovation. And when we came in, one of the first things that the president did was the open data, open gov, create the flow of information that we used to think was top secret. This flow of information was able to be used to create the sharing economy, was able to be used to create distribution systems that were more efficient. It was able to create financial mechanisms where people could actually make money, distribute money towards, throughout developing countries, modern countries and everything. So policies, okay, what we learn from each other today can create strong policies or can create bad policies. And I always think from a data perspective, we have to be able to use the data in the best way to create better tools for our constituency. So, many of the policies that we did and we tried to do did create some great momentum, especially growing jobs and growing innovation. So I just want to leave you with that idea that when we balance between policies and entrepreneurship and projects, corporate projects and everything, let's always believe and let's always remember that the citizen is at the center. The citizen is the core of our environment, of our cities, and we can have to plan for them. We have to make sure that they are not forgotten, that they're not marginalized, that they are constantly in the back of our heads, because this is who we serve. And that's who we serve as in the business community and in the public community. So very, very important for all of us to be able to take that into mind. I'm going to briefly introduce our first speaker. She is Sasha Costanza-Chock. She is the MIT Associate Professor out of Boston. Yay, Boston. I used to live in Boston, so I'm very excited. And Sasha, she is the Associate Professor for Civic Media at MIT and the Faculty Associate at the Berkman Keith Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University as well. Their work focuses on social movements, transformative media, and design justice. And design justice is key because her book, called Design Justice, will be published by the MIT Press in February 2020. So hopefully we'll all get to read that. And she's giving us a little bit of preview of that book, so excited to have her here. Please, Sasha, come on up and grace us with your wonderful presence and your knowledge.
Gracias, Natalia, por esa introducción. ¿Me pueden escuchar? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be here and to present some of this work. And I'm going to be talking today a little bit about design justice, and I'm going to introduce the concept of the Smart Enough Cities, which is a book by Ben Green, and get into a little bit of the work that I and many colleagues have been doing. But I did want to start, just in case everyone's not familiar with it, the framing of this panel is around the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and so I thought I would begin by just quickly noting that that is the title of a book which was earlier published as an essay by Klaus Schwab, who's the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. He published an article in 2015 and a book in 2017, and it's been very influential. And in that book, he talks about a new wave of transformation that's about the linking of the physical, the digital, and the biological. And he names, or lists rather, many technologies, among them artificial intelligence, 3D printing, genetic modification, CRISPR, and he kind of goes on. And I'll be honest with you, when I look at this work, if one of my MIT undergraduates came to me and presented this as a thesis, I would be skeptical because it's so overbroad that I find it very hard to grasp analytical purchase on it to use as a meaningful way to think about what it is that we're facing. In other words, as a feminist scholar and writer and thinker who works on science and technology in the context of marginalized communities, I think we need to be specific and we need to talk about particular contexts and particular bodies and how they're affected by particular technologies. So in a popular graphic for this text, which is on the Salesforce blog, We're All Moving Forward, you can see this image of the Fourth Industrial Revolution with a woman of color controlling, I guess, a plane, a television, a robot, and a home speaker system from her smartphone, or maybe she's being controlled by them. And I think unintentionally, but perhaps accurately, she's standing on a giant representation of her carbon footprint. Not really. That's my interpretation of the image. So we need to think about the unintended consequences of the developments of these technologies, and we need to think about the rhetoric and the discourse versus the realities. So if you take nothing else away from the talk that I'm giving now, I would recommend that you read a book by Ben Green called The Smart Enough City. It's with the MIT Press. And in it, Professor Green analyzes the way that city managers, in collaboration with corporate providers, are making promises about automated decision-making systems, or ADS, that at best are often snake oil and at worst actively harm the most marginalized communities that aren't included in the historical data sets that are used to train them. So he does think that we do need to deploy city sensing technology and so on, but he cautions us, and he provides a number of excellent examples. Similarly, Virginia Eubanks, this is your second item for your reading list. In her phenomenal and breathtaking book, Automating Inequality, How High-Tech Tools Profile, Police, and Punish the Poor, has done a sweeping and scathing analysis of the deployment of systems like predictive policing and automated decision-making tools around access to welfare benefits in the US context, where she argues that these ADS are being largely used to penalize those who are already the most marginalized, rather than simply make systems more efficient, which is what we're all hoping they will do. But because I do operate through a feminist analysis of science and technology, I'd like to ground the conversation in a particular and specific example. And so I'm going to draw from my own lived experience as a transgender person, as a non-binary trans feminine person, in my process arriving here at the smart city as I go through airport security systems. So when I went to Boston Logan Airport, I go through the millimeter wave scanner, as many of you probably did. And so you stand there, you step into the device, and you raise your hands, above your head like this. Is this headset mic still working? Can you still hear me? So, you raise your hands, the thing spins around you, and then the agent asks you to come forward. And then if an anomaly has been detected, then they use their hands to touch the anomaly, and hopefully then you'll be free to go. So what many cisgender people, and cisgender means people whose gender identity conforms with the sex you were assigned at birth, what many cisgender people don't know, but almost all transgender and gender nonconforming people who've ever been through a millimeter wave scanner system know, is that when you enter these systems, the agent is visually inspecting you and deciding whether they think that you're a boy or a girl, and they press a blue button for girl or for boy and a pink button for girl, and then the system compares the millimeter wave resolution scan of your body to a statistical norm of what that body shape is supposed to look like and contain. So in my case, if the agent selects that they believe that I'm a woman, then my body is scanned, and I often get this lovely yellow highlight around my groin area, which an agent then puts their hands all over. And if I'm dressing more masculine that day, and they believe that I'm a man, they press the man button, and in that case, I get this area of my body highlighted, and then I get an agent feeling me up. And so this is happening because my body is always going to be flagged as anomalous by the millimeter wave scanner because of the particular socio-technical configuration of gender normativity or cis-normativity, or the assumption that all people have a gender identity and presentation that conforms with the sex they were assigned at birth. And that's been built into the scanner, it's been built into the statistical models that it's using, and it's been built into the TSA security protocol that the agents are using when they make their decisions. So this is an example from my own lived experience of how socio-technical systems that are built around modal norms systematically exclude and place undue burdens upon any member of the population that doesn't fit those norms. So these airport security scanner systems don't only flag trans and gender nonconforming people for additional and extremely invasive search, they also tend to flag especially black people whose hair often triggers the systems. They tend to flag anyone who wears a head wrap. They tend to flag people with disabilities who may use devices to augment their mobility. They tend to flag older people, anyone who's for example, if you're incontinent and you're wearing a diaper, an adult diaper, you'll probably be flagged for that. So basically, many, many people who don't fit into neatly packaged, binary gendered, normative body types are all getting flagged by these systems every day. And that's an instance of what the scholar of science and technology, Langdon Winner, calls the politics of artifacts. The ways that normative ideas about how people are supposed to exist in the world get built into socio-technical systems, and thereby they are reproduced. Now, the way that these systems are biased against many different types of people, not only trans and gender nonconforming people, has been written about extensively by surveillance studies scholar Simone Brown. in her brilliant book, Dark Matters. And a student who I've been working with at the MIT Media Lab, Joy Bulamwini, has technically demonstrated the way that facial analysis systems are biased both by race and by gender, or technically by skin tone reflectance and by facial structure. And she's demonstrated as part of her master's thesis the way that facial analysis systems tend to perform worst on darker-skinned women of color than on anybody else. And that's an artifact of the way that the data sets were built, the facial data sets that are gathered and used to train the systems. And partly through her work, a number of those systems have improved on the benchmarks, but I think that many people didn't really understand the fundamental insight of her work, which is that all automated decision-making support systems need to be regularly evaluated by outside evaluators using an intersectional feminist lens, which means that you explore how systems perform not only on universalized average people, but also how they perform specifically on subcategories. For example, do they perform differently on women and men? Do they perform differently on darker skin-toned people than lighter skin-toned people? And what happens when you do a grid analysis of how those things intersect, which is what she did when she demonstrated this technical bias. I also, since this week was Transgender Day of Remembrance, want to kind of share a moment of silence for Johanna Medina Leon and for Roxana Hernandez. These are both two trans Latina women who died in custody of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, in the United States after being detained, trying to seek refuge for gender-based violence that they were facing in their home countries, but they were not allowed to enter by the Trump administration's ICE. They were detained and they died in detention after being denied access to the medications that they need. And I wanted to put them up here on this screen because when I talk about my own personal experience of going through airport security systems, I want to emphasize that my own white skin, my educational privilege, my access to resources as an MIT professor shield me from some of the worst violence that people experience as they try and navigate border security systems in general. Because if you walk around the expo hall, you're going to find a lot of companies that are selling border security systems that are supposed to provide better information through algorithmic systems that can use automated decision making to help immigration officials decide who to let in and who to not let in. And the most extreme example of this type of thing is the Trump administration's recent decision to gather social media profiles from people who are applying for visas to the US. So if you've applied for a visa to the US recently, this is going to happen to you. And they put out a contract for companies to develop a system to help them use social media profiles, ingest that information, and then make a prediction about this was going to be a good immigrant or a bad immigrant. A decision to put out a bid for that, which was roundly criticized by pretty much every scholar who works in the field of natural language processing, saying this is not something that you can do. This is not a useful approach to this question. This is going to be harmful. We know that natural language processing is deeply discriminatory against different language minority categories, and so on and so forth. So it's not a good solution, but it's one that's being sold, and this is some of the snake oil. I also want to emphasize that violence against gender nonconforming people isn't a new problem or something that's only being instantiated through automated decision-making systems. It's something that was spread throughout the world during the age of European settler colonialism. So this is an image of Vasco Núñez de Balboa in 1513 having his dogs devour 40 third-gender people that he encountered in what is modern-day Panama, who he thought were possessed by the devil because he saw them as men in women's clothing, when in fact they were a third gender people who performed a particular social role and cultural function in their society. So the idea here is that long-standing historical patterns of discrimination and violence by gender, by race, and so on and so forth are now, unfortunately, being reproduced in automated decision-making systems that we're building and selling, partly because the data that they're using is biased, and partly because the systems they're meant to enforce reflect a particular worldview that has been ascendant for a period of a few hundred years, but doesn't reflect the entirety of human experience, ontology, and epistemology. We can read more about this type of violence in books like Harsha Walia's Undoing Border Imperialism and Ruha Benjamin's phenomenal book, Race After Technology, in which she systematically explores the ways that different types of technology design, even when well-intentioned, are often reproducing racial discrimination and the legacy of hundreds of years of white supremacy and slavery. And so she's a professor at Princeton. I highly recommend this book. So after you read Ben Green's Smart Enough Cities and Virginia Eubank's Automating Inequality, you should read Race After Technology. It's a phenomenal book that's going to be influencing the entire conversation about many of the systems that are being sold here in the expo today. And I think the point of all of these is that we need to understand that much design unintentionally reproduces existing patterns of discrimination, race, class, and gender. And we need to think about the type of world that we're trying to build and the type of systems that we're trying to build. Do we want to continually reproduce these systems, or do we want to build a world that's more just for everyone, more inclusive of different experiences and bodies and histories, and of course a world that will survive, that is ecologically sustainable, and that will be habitable for humans within a few generations. And that brings me to the second half of the talk, which is about design justice. Because my work and the work of the design justice community is exactly about this question. It's about the relationship between socio-technical systems, design, and power, and it's about a growing community of designers, developers, artists, technologists, researchers, and community organizers, and many others who are interested in building a community of practice that is about systematically challenging rather than reproducing unequal systems. So it's a framework for analysis of how the design of socio-technical systems influences the distribution of benefits and burdens between various groups of people. And a simple way of thinking about that is that many systems that we design today assign more of their benefits to those who are most powerful and less of the benefits to those who are less powerful in society. And automated decision-making systems often also assign more of the harms to those who are less powerful and less of the harms to those who are more powerful. Design justice also is explicit, unlike some similar frameworks like design for good or human-centered design. Design justice is explicit in thinking about how design reproduces or challenges what Black feminist scholar Patricia Hill Collins calls the matrix of domination: white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, capitalism, ableism, settler colonialism, and other forms of structural and historical inequality. And if you don't understand what those terms are, you can read her fabulous book, Black Feminist Thought. In addition to being a way of thinking about how we want to design systems to transform the world, design justice is a community of practice. It's a growing community of practice that focuses on the equitable distribution of design's benefits and burdens, meaningful participation in design decisions, and recognition that there are community-based, indigenous, and diasporic design traditions, knowledge, and practices. And a simple metric you can use as you're thinking about which smart systems to build and deploy and instantiate in your cities or in your communities is you can think about who was involved in the process of designing the system, who might potentially be harmed by the system, and who benefits most from the system. And what you want is to ensure that people who are going to be most harmed are involved in the process of systems design and analysis. We're a network that formed in 2016, and we're continually growing. I don't have time to go into the details. You can talk to me after. But in a couple of minutes that I have left, I think what I'll do is skip forward to highlight a couple of resources that you might want to check out that have come out of this network and its work. So for example, if you go to consentfultech.io, you'll find a resource around what would it mean to build consentful technology built on what we've learned from the sexual consent movement. So good consent is FRIES. It's freely given, it's revocable, it's informed, it's enthusiastic, and it's specific. And much of the consent that we're used to giving in digital systems is none of those things. So we want to think about what would that look like, and we have resources for that. You could think about the way that we intervene in spaces like hackathons. So Catherine D'Ignazio the other day presented work on feminist data science, and she was involved with Alexis Hope and others in the Make the Breast Pump Not Suck hackathon and policy summit, which happened for 2 years running and was about creating spaces for redesigning and reimagining technologies that center communities that often are excluded from design processes. You could read the More Than Code report, which is a report that we produced after interviewing over 100 public interest technology practitioners about how they think about building systems in ways that are inclusive of the most marginalized communities. And I teach this type of process at MIT in a place called the Collaborative Design Studio at codesign.mit.edu. And so in the last 30 seconds, I'm going to skip that. And I'm just going to share with you the Design Justice Network principles. So these are a set of principles that we use in the Design Justice Network to inform all the projects that we're working on as we're building new interfaces, new machine learning systems, or new models for the built environment. And I'll just go through them and then I'll be done. The first principle is that we use design to sustain, heal, and empower our communities, as well as to seek liberation from exploitative and oppressive systems. We also center the voices of those who are directly impacted by the outcomes of design processes, rather than top-down design. We prioritize design's impacts on communities over the intentions of the designer, because we know where good intentions lead, right? The road to somewhere is paved with them. We view change as emergent from an accountable, accessible, and collaborative process, rather than simply a point at the end in the process. We see designers as facilitators rather than experts, and we also believe that everyone is an expert based on their own lived experience. We all have unique and brilliant contributions to bring to a design process that no amount of so-called empathic design or human-centered design or charrettes are going to surface. So you need to have people with actual experience of a problem area on your design team with decision-making power if you want to build smart city systems that are just and truly sustainable. To do that well, we have to share design knowledge and tools with our communities, and that helps us work towards sustainable, community-led, and controlled outcomes. We also need to work towards non-exploitative solutions that reconnect us to the earth and to each other. And finally, before seeking new design solutions and believing that through techno-solutionist or through what Mar Hicks calls techno-chauvinist approaches to city development and maintenance, instead of that, we need to begin by looking at what's already working at the community level, and that includes honoring and uplifting traditional, indigenous, and local knowledge and practices. And we believe that if we join forces between triple bottom line firms, city governments that are really committed to democratic processes, and community-led organizations and social movements, we do believe that we can build future cities that reflect these principles, that are inclusive of those who are often most marginalized and harmed by automated decision-making systems, and that is a world where many worlds can fit and that will survive the current wave of ecological devastation that we're living through. Thank you. Thank you.
Presentation. Thank you so much, Sasha. And this is what, what this Congress is about, this is what this conversation is about, is how do we find that balance, right? How do we have that dialogue? And our next speaker is going to talk a little bit about one of the biggest companies in the world, which is Amazon. And, for me, it's close to my heart because I know Amazon since it first started with books, right? My family here in Spain has a lot of bookstores, and seeing a company go from books to innovation to growing and so on and becoming one of the biggest companies in the world is tremendous. But there's a balance as well. And we're going to talk about how we actually can create better systems, because in order for us to communicate, in order for us to grow, in order for us to see what is the value of our data, we need to be able to manage that data. And Amazon Cloud Services has actually been able to help a lot of entrepreneurs bring them in, figuring out ways that they can work together in order to be able to serve the citizens a little bit better, and to get all the stuff that you want as well. So we are bringing up Pilar Torres. She is the Amazon Web Services with the Amazon's public sector for Spain and Portugal, and she'll be talking a little bit about what Amazon is doing here in the region and some of the projects that have been quite innovative, especially how we can actually work all together for making better decisions in the end. So thank you, Pilar, for being here today. I give you the floor.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Natalia. Thank you very much, everyone. Building on Natalia's words, just to give a brief background on AWS. AWS is a company that was born 13 years ago to provide cloud services to startups, to enterprises in all sectors, to governments, cities, education organizations, non-profit, because it's the evolution of how our customers have been adopting these technologies has been amazing along these 13 years. And in fact, AWS was born based on a need that Amazon had, which was how to cope with very exceptional peaks of demands on very specific times of the year. We are approaching one of those very, very soon. And how to create a technology framework that would allow a company or a government or a city to use IT technology the same as we use electricity today. On demand, pay only for what you use, and have always the capacity that you need, no matter how big or small that capacity will be. The smart city concept has evolved during these years. Certainly, some years ago, it was very much focused on developing point solutions, which were not that different from what Amazon started in their own history, creating monolith applications. So monolith services are services that are self-contained, self-built, but don't speak too much to other services, to other sources of data, to other parts of the organization. And Amazon themselves realized that this was not a very efficient to create new services, especially when the company had to cope with growing expectations and growing demands from the end users. So Amazon moved into a microservices strategy, which was about built or using the cloud, building services that could talk to each other, were incredibly flexible, incredibly agile, and easy to develop, and that would produce, in communicating with each other, a much better experience to our customers. These are some definitions of what a smart city is. I'm sure you have your own one as well, but I want to highlight a few points here. One is, on the first one, is the focus on the citizens. And this has been mentioned already, to really make the citizen the center of the digital transformation. Because the transformation is for a purpose, is to enable a better future and a better present for the citizens in the cities. Also to address public issues and to be sustainable. So these three definitions, coming from different sources, somehow gather the three key elements of citizen centricity, address public issues, and be sustainable. And smart cities have to deal with these challenges and opportunities and areas of prioritization around healthcare, public safety, utilities, culture, community, transportation, and there are very, very common drivers for many cities. And there are many cases already of different solutions that cities across the world are creating to address those challenges. Beta Inkana is a platform running on AWS that provides support on emergencies and floods and how to rescue people based on the information that citizens are posting online. So this information, once collected and analyzed, allows to design the best evacuation routes for the people who are in the most critical conditions in these emergencies. Different case about how to improve city services in Boston. You can capture in real time what's the situation of the road pavements and send this information to the city. We will be then able to improve and fix and make the infrastructures better. And a recent example from Cagliari, how this city in Italy solved the problem they had when they have municipal elections and they had to post the information publicly about the election results and the election data. They solved it using the cloud for 125 euros. This was the cost of Cagliari city to solve the IT needs for offering the elections information to the citizens. So this is truly a democratization of technology because it's an incredibly compelling cost. In terms of technology, AWS is a company of builders and builders who create technology that can be used for our customers. A number of elements here that I will talk a bit more during the presentation: Internet of Things, AI and machine learning, data lakes, voice and augmented reality. In IoT, our approach is to cover from the device to the data analysis, but in a very modular way. So different frameworks can provide different levels of access to the data. And you have data that happens in the device and that needs to be operated at the device level on the edge, where maybe you don't have highly scalable or high performance computing, but then you can progress and use this data in more complex layers to do the full analytics. One case is what the Newport City in Wales is doing to improve the flood control, the waste management, and the air quality, analyzing the sensor data, capturing this data, and then making decisions based on the data they are collecting from the sensors. I want to highlight here the voice of the city themselves. One of the things they appreciated most was the agility and the speed in implementing the solution. In the past, or with more traditional on-premise technologies, a project can take months because you have to first envision the solution, you have to provision, you have to size the technology, you have to provision it, you have to purchase it, you have to install it, you have to deploy it. This can take months and even years. With the cloud, you can do this in days, in minutes, depending on the application. And this is the beauty and the agility that provides for innovation, which we see that it's truly the value that our customers appreciate. Another case is Enel, one of the companies here at this expo, how they're connecting millions of smart meters to detect fraud, but also to the improvements to maintain the infrastructure. Their entire strategy is to move all to the cloud in a progressive way, but look at the savings figures. So these are really compelling in terms of cost efficiency as well. So I said speed, agility, but also cost efficiency is super important. And then scalable, which was one of the values that Enel recognized in implementing this solution. At the end of the day, it's all about the data. This is what the city of Manchester says. It's fast, it's agile, but it allows you to use the power of the data that you have. And this is why data lakes are so important. In the past, the cost of storage, the cost of the technology was a limitation on the amount of data you could afford to store. So you really had to be intentional. Which data should I store for my future analysis and my future predictions and decision making, and which data I cannot afford to keep because might be useless or I don't see the value at the moment. This is no longer the case. With data lakes at a very, very scalable and low costs, it is possible to be free of these restrictions on the data you will analyze or you will store, because you have multiple devices, multiple data sources, and they are only growing. And by the way, big data is not new. Analysis is not new. This is how 80 years ago, exactly in 1939, analytics was done by Transport for London. This is how 4 million tickets from the passengers were analyzed to see any pattern or to see the patterns on which were the routes that were most frequently used by passengers, to be able to increase the frequency of trains on those routes, to schedule preventing maintenance, etc. So this is how it was done. But thanks to the digital transformation, this is how it's done now. It's real time. It's not only used by the Transport for London, but it's only used by the citizens. So this is another big revolution. These services are not only for the entity or the organization of the city who provides the service. It's for the citizen, it's for the person who uses and consumes the services, and this is the beauty of it. This is how Sardinia, another city in Europe, is using these data lakes to plan for a situation that many cities in the world have, which is how their population grows in very specific times of the year. Let's say the summer season or Christmas. So the challenges are not that different from the challenges that Amazon had when they had to serve the demand on a Black Friday or Christmas. It's a really limited period in the year where Sardinia's population multiplies by 5. How can a city cope with that, with this growth, with this demand of resources, of infrastructure in an effective way? Will you dimension your infrastructure for the 5 million in summer? Or will you dimension for your 1 million stable citizen population? Or will you use a flexible infrastructure that allows you to scale up and down as you need? And hopefully Sardinia can double their visitors shortly. On artificial and machine learning, because this is an underlying topic on the digital transformation, our approach is again, a layered approach. So artificial intelligence and machine learning require very specialized resources from a technology perspective, but also from a human perspective. You need to have data analysts, you have to have data scientists, you need to have expert system administrators. So for those who have this expertise and who want to build their own algorithm or predictive system, the bottom layer allows you to combine the technologies available and to do your own thing. So for instance, TensorFlow is a very common machine learning platform widely used for natural processing language, for artificial vision. 85% of the cloud workloads of TensorFlow run on AWS. But not all the companies, not all the cities, not all the organizations have those resources that certain companies have. So for that, the mid layer allows to save enormous amount of time and cost associated to processing and preparing the data for the analysis, and then we have the top layer where you have resources or services which are ready to use. For instance, voice, translation, recognition, etc. Let me talk a bit about the voice, because this is, according to our customers, the new frontier. And many solutions and many cities and services are now developed on voice. 2 years ago, the state of Georgia in the US announced asked the Georgia government skill on Alexa to provide citizen information via voice. Today, the number of languages has increased. This city, Aylesbury Vale, is using it to enable a much more human communication with the city. When do I have to pay my taxes? When is my recycle route coming to my street? These kind of questions that can be much more accessible if you do it through the voice. And also in Italy, Torino has created Alexa skill as a friend between administrators and citizens, again to bring this closeness between the city and the citizen, to remove barriers that still certain parts of the population have to access digital vehicles to interact with their administration or with the city, and to make it in a very human way. Finally, augmented reality, it's a growing area. We are seeing very interesting cases here. As a summary, it's all about the data. It's all about using the innovation, the digital transformation in the cities in a much more agile, fast, cost-efficient way to decrease the cost and the burden of innovation, because for us, in our own experience, innovation is linked to failure, is linked to trial, is linked to error, and the faster and the cheaper you're able to do this iteration, the more successful you will be in your innovation product. And there are no entry barriers when you start creating solutions with these technologies. As you saw from Cagliari, it's digital democracy, so this technology is available for the largest government, for the smaller city, or for any of you, and you can start today. So with this, thank you very much, and you will be very welcome to visit at our booth. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Pilar. So, folks, we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of break so we can actually network. Espero que puedan conocerse un poquito más. Vamos a tener un excelente panel. We're going to have a great panel led by my friend here, Ms. Yingwei Fu from Equal Ocean. She's coming from all the way from Beijing, China. And the panel is quite amazing. If you think about all the people that we have today, we have a panel where France is represented, where Norway and Colombia and Luxembourg, the US. So figure out how we all have this amazing diversity where we come from, and we come together here in Barcelona to be able to learn and be able to figure out how we can actually make a better world for our citizens. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to set this up, and make sure you come back in about 10-15 minutes and take advantage of learning and being able to connect with our speakers. And I look forward to many more ideas and many more collaborations so we can actually build a better world. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel, and I'm the moderator of this session. I'm Yingwei Fu from Beijing, as Natalia just introduced. So in this panel, we will discuss in the Industrial Revolution 4.0, how do we harness technology and adapt it into our smart city infrastructure. So now let's introduce our dear guest speakers. The first one is Ms. Grazia Fiore. She's the user program coordinator of EuroC. Please take a seat. And the second one is Miss Juanita Rodriguez. I just learned it. Don't blame me. She's the Vice Chancellor of Innovation from University EAN. And the third one is Mr. Pierre Gorens. She's the head of Division Electronic Communications from the Luxembourg State Ministry. And then our last speaker, Mr. Joel Mills. He's the CEO of Auckland City. Okay, we'll start very soon. As we all know, the Smart City, this is from 2011. Smart City Expo has been held in Barcelona for until now. It is let's do the math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the 7th, I guess. And 200 years ago, there are less than 3% people live in the urban area, but now there are more than 50% people live in urban area until 2018. And it is expected will be more than 80% of people live in the urban area in the next century. So the urban cities has become a very important habitat for human beings, and how to organize all these resources and how to make the city run more efficiently, it's become a challenge for all of us as the population explodes. Next, let's have our first speaker to have her presentation. Please take the stage.
Thank you. Is there a way that I can turn the slides? Should I go there?
Yes. I think there's a speaker here. Yeah, I should press.
Okay, should I make it from here or there?
Both works.
That's okay.
Your
So from
preference,
here?
yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much for inviting us. I'm very excited to be here. My presentation is called Space for Cities. When we think about space, and when I first started working in the industry, I thought about planets, I thought about exploration, I even thought about aliens, but I never thought about some assets that are actually orbiting the Earth at thousands out there, satellites. Why are satellites important? Because they have applications. There are things that we can do on Earth with satellites. Probably most of you are already technologically educated, but for those of you who are not familiar with satellite applications, I'm going to tell you that there are mainly 3 satellite applications. The first one is Earth observation, meaning pictures, more or less, that are taken from satellites of the Earth. You can observe mainly changes in what is happening on the Earth by comparing images of the same spot taken at different times. The second application is communication. Is basically what is used in most remote locations to capture TV and mobile signals. And the third one is satellite navigation. Most of you know this application as GPS, which is the US positioning system. And we use it actually to know the exact location of things as they move around. So I work for an association of space agencies, which is called EURISI. Most nations have an agency, a minister, or an office in charge of space affairs. The association has been created in 1989 with the goal of actually communicating on what is possible with satellite applications. So we collect stories of uses of satellite data. We try to understand what are the needs, the challenges, and the motivations behind these uses. And then we give feedback to our member space agencies and to the European Commission on what are the challenges of cities and SMEs and public administrations in general as well, actually, trying to use these applications, these services. So how do we do it? We actually interview public administration, SMEs, and NGOs. We ask them what they do with satellite applications. We collect these stories in articles. We have a database on our website, eurisi.org, that you can browse. And we organize, in collaboration with regions and cities, events, thematic events on how to use this data in different sectors. Moreover, we have a set of publications that you can access on our website. So why is the issue of satellite application exciting? Not only because we use this information on a daily basis, but also because new services and data are being created. In particular, the European Union has built its own system of satellites. Galileo is our satellite navigation system, and Copernicus is our Earth observation system. If you go on copernicus.eu, you will not only find raw data, but also services that are free and open to use to anyone in Europe and worldwide. So it's very important, since we paid for these satellites to be there and for the services to be developed, that we are aware of their existence and that we use them. So what we are trying to understand right now at Euris is how to maximize the potential of satellite application in cities. We launched last year this initiative that is called Space for City, trying to understand how satellite applications can help cities become safer, more resilient, cleaner, more healthy and inclusive, and more efficient. And I'm going to give you, to walk you through a set of examples now on how satellite data are used in some European cities. So this is what we want to do, so to document experiences, to identify good practice, needs and challenges, and to give feedback to decision makers. So let's start from the clean city topic, and from waste in particular. So this is an experience of Exeter. Exeter is a city in the UK, in Devon, middle-sized, approximately 100,000 inhabitants. They had a problem to actually coordinate their waste collection trucks. They didn't have a coordinated way to manage the trucks, and as a result, actually, their phone lines were inundated were flooded with requests from citizens that didn't have their bins emptied. So what they did was that they equipped all their waste trucks with a satellite navigation equipment which tracks their movement. Moreover, they have a web-based platform in which both the administration and the citizens can see where the trucks are and when their bins will be emptied. As a result, they are saving £240,000 per year in capital costs for vehicles, and £150,000 per year in revenue expenditures. We are somehow obliged to give an economic value to these services, but we shall remember that public administrations are not there to save money, but to provide good services to people. So let's look at another example. This is an example from Lyon. Lyon is a city in France. They have been working to requalify a neighborhood, and they participated in a European project for which they were obliged basically to have 70% of the energy produced in this neighborhood produced through green technologies. So what they did is that they implemented a solar energy park with the aid of satellite imagery. How can satellite imagery help here? Through satellite imagery, you can actually see the solar radiation of surfaces. This means that you can predict how much energy a solar panel will produce in an exact location. And once you have the value of how much energy a panel should produce, you are actually able to detect malfunctioning just by comparing the actual output of a panel with the expected output. This means that, like this, they can save a good amount of time and human resources because they don't need to go every day or every week on the installations to see if they're working, but they can do it comfortably from a control center and just send an employee when a solar panel is not producing the expected output of energy. Let's go to another area of the smart city environment, which is safe and resilient cities. These 4 areas have been built on the basis of the Millennium Development Goal number 11. So, and we go here to a village of 1,000 people in Occitanie, in the south of France, Alban. So this village has a water reservoir which is in the mountains, where there is no internet connection. So what they did is that in order to monitor the pumps, they placed basically a satellite dish there, and thanks to the satellite dish, they are able to receive in real time information about the functioning of the pumps and the quality of the water. And here again, they are able to save time and resources by intervening only when it's needed on the pumps. Third dimension, healthy and inclusive city. You know that there is a proliferation of apps out there. Most of them are based on satellite navigation. This is an app that is called I Will Share. It has been created again in France to serve the interest of 3 million people with a mobility impairment who can now share in real time information about barriers, about coffee shops that are equipped, for example, for people with impaired mobility. Here we don't have an economic indicator of why this app is important, but we don't need the economic indicator again. So like this, we have an example of a participative tool in which users, between brackets, become actually masters of their own destiny, and they intervene and they act themselves to improve their life. And we go to the fourth and last part, efficient city. This is an example that comes from Lemvig in Denmark. So in Denmark, actually, there is an entity, so in Lemvig, that is responsible for water pumps. So they noticed at the point that in a specific location, water pumps were breaking much faster than elsewhere, and they didn't understand why. And by using satellite imagery, they were able to notice that in a particular location, the soil was moving much faster than elsewhere, breaking the pumps. So right now, they have, on the basis of a satellite imagery, they have a map indicating with different colors where the ground is moving and at which speed, and where pumps needs to be substituted, so they can prioritize maintenance works on their water pump network. These are just a few examples on what you can do with satellite application in cities. Much more examples, can be mentioned and are present on our website. We need people to come up with ideas on how to use this data, because the data is available, the data is out there, free of charge, and we need actually to take advantage of how our money is spent and make sure that we have power on technology and we decide in which direction the technology is going, and we don't let those who understand technology to decide what we have to do with it. So in case you have any ideas, in case you want to partner with us, in case you know of a good example of how satellite applications are used in cities or elsewhere, please come to us, tell us your story, and we will be able to disseminate it and to put you in touch with others who are needing your experience. If you don't have experience and you want to get in touch with city administrators or SMEs who already use this data, please come to us, because we can equally put you in touch with the experts and the cities that already have an experience with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for Grazia's share about the satellites, and then let's get back to Earth. So satellites collect data, and how do we use this data to assist our mayors or governors to run the city, to help the city become more efficient? Let's hear what Juanita says. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm so happy to be here representing today Universidad de Anne, but I'm really representing a joint effort between private and public entities, universities, to really have different city solutions. So we are talking about a specific project that is called Clean Transportation. And let's see. And is led by Pro Bogotá. Pro Bogotá is a nonprofit agency. It's like a think tank, more of a do tank because it develops projects that is private, is owned by the biggest companies in Colombia, but is really looking about having an idea of the city in the long term. It's not working for a specific interest of the companies that are part of Pro Bogotá, but it's really thinking about the city. So in their plan, in the big long-term vision plan, they have different topics: security, mobility, future of work and economic development, urban regional planning, public leadership, security. But at the end, when you focus on these topics, you are really talking about smart cities. So they launch an idea of having everyone working in Colombia, and specifically in Bogotá, in a joint effort to develop city solutions. So we started with some challenges that we have in Bogotá. This year we start the year with some terrible news. One of them was that Bogotá, people in Bogotá, is wasting 272 hours per year in a traffic jam. The other one was that for the first time in our history, we had a terrible environmental and air alert in Bogotá for the first time. So we used to know that kind of problems, for instance, in Mexico City. We used to know that Medellin had in the past some of these alarms, but we didn't have one like that in Bogotá, and we started the year with that. So we started thinking that really when we're talking about smart cities, we are talking about a multi-stakeholder problem. We cannot talk about it just from the government. We have to take into account the citizens' opinion. We have to take into account the private sector responsibility, but also universities and civil society. So this is the way that we have to deal with these kind of challenges, and we have also to consider the fourth revolution technologies in order to help resolve this kind of problems. So we started thinking about the possibility of having a sum of capabilities in collecting and analyzing data so we can have better solutions in the country. So we start to bringing together to the table different capabilities from universities, from companies, and also needs specifically from the city government, but also from other entities that are working with different companies. And what we want to do is to have tangible pilots, to have real data, to have indexes, to have indicators, and to help building regulation, public policy, but also good practices from the companies. And we are going to launch the next week this sum of capabilities that is going to be called Bogotá Inteligente. The first pilot, because we didn't want to launch this new effort without already have started a pilot. Our first pilot is a clean transportation pilot. And what's so important about clean transportation? What we know is that all the freight trucks are the ones that are creating more jams in the city, but also all the air problem is one of the biggest factor. So we are working with different companies that are getting into the city with these trucks, and we are talking to them how we can really have numbers, how we can have data, so we can manage and have a better solution for this kind of transportation. So we are going to collect data from these vehicles, and we are going to have all the baseline for logistic performance, particulate material, specifically 2.5 parts per million, which is the really harmful for healthy, all the simulation for greenhouse gases, and we are going to, from this data, prioritize action as eco-driving. We are going to work in preventive maintenance of the vehicles. We are going to work on capacity allocation, and what we really want to achieve is technological reconversion. We have been working with the municipality, the persons in charge of environment, the persons in charge of mobility and also of development of the city have been working with us very jointly. And as we can see in this, here, no, doesn't show, but you can see the truck. What we are doing is we are putting a SIM in each truck, and we are really taking and collecting the data in the real time. We are sending that to the cloud of Amazon. We have here an alliance with Amazon that is helping us here, and with the sensor that we created in one of the university, in EAN University, in the one that I work for, and we are analyzing the data with other university, which is El Rosario. We are going to deliver to the city this information. It goes a little bit like this. As you can see, we are going to have all the environmental data and emissions data. We have a specific device that was created, and it's a device that was created in the university that allows us to really have in movement the data of the PM 2.5, which is, I think, the most important thing that we develop here. We send that to the cloud, and we are monitoring during all the travels of these vehicles, all the information that you are going to see here. Noise, we have all this kind of information, and we have that in a big dashboard, so every company can see it, can see his specific information, but we can also see a chart where we can see exactly how this is working in the city. At the end, these are the entities that are part of our specific project and that are part of the sum of capabilities. We have Pro Bogotá, which is this nonprofit agency that is leading the project, but we are working also with the LANDI, which is the national entity that has all the industrial and big companies working together. We have here Amazon. We have also Tigo. Tigo is a technology company. We have 3 different universities, and we have a company that is working at a law firm that is helping us with all the IP efforts and all the agreements that we have to share between us. And we are working also with SENA. SENA is a technical university owned by the government, and they are working with us in designing an eco-driving and maintenance course for all the people that is driving these kind of cars. So we can have the pilot going at the same time that these persons that are driving are being trained in how to drive better, so we can have less jams, but at the same time we can have less environmental issues in the city. So this is the project, is a way that we are showing that if we have a capability in collecting and analyzing data, we really can have this kind of opportunity for each kind of project. It doesn't have to be a mobility project. It can also be, I don't know, any kind of project, because at the end what you really have to do is data. The only way that a public policy is well done is when you have real information and not just an opinion. So what we are really doing here is helping the government, helping companies to really have the information and the good information to take some decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Juanita. And then next, let's back to the topic again. How to harness technology and adapt it to the smart cities infrastructure. And let's listen what our Mr. Pierre will go into introduce the technology to us. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Yes, we have all this about smart cities is a lot about harvesting the benefits of digitization. I am representing Luxembourg Ministry, which is also in charge of the digital policy in Luxembourg. But what I want to present today is more about the networks behind all these applications. And we have heard about possibilities to use, also to misuse artificial intelligence. We have heard about the importance and the interest to use the cloud. But behind this, the cloud and all the devices that should communicate, we need also the networks. And the networks are those who should provide the necessary connectivity. So there can be different types of networks. There can be fixed networks, there can be mobile networks, there can be satellite networks, there can be terrestrial networks. There is the old copper infrastructure. There is the fiber now. There is the cable networks. Sometimes they can be combined also. For example, Wi-Fi is, after all, a wireless access to a fixed network. But all they are necessary for making most of the smart city applications possible. So my main focus will be about 5G, because 5G will really be the infrastructure of the future, making these new applications possible. In Europe, the European Commission has presented an action plan which encourages the member states to begin the deployment of 5G at the latest next year. And the agenda is that most major cities and transport routes should be covered by 2025. 5G is about personal communications. It is about faster communications, more bandwidth to transmit more data, but it is also about machine-to-machine communications, which are mostly those who are needed for the smart city applications. Also, smart home, e-health, intelligent transport, all these applications will be supported by the 5G networks. And it's important to stress that this is not only for industry and for businesses, but that it is also very useful for the public entities, for the municipalities and collectivities, and that the people should be in the center of all these efforts. In Luxembourg, we are preparing to launch 5G by next year. We have elaborated a national strategy for that. And we have in particular acknowledged the strategic importance of this new kind of network. This is mainly about speed, this slide. It shows that the green part, that mobile networks historically have been not as efficient for the speed and the transmission of data than the fixed networks. Fiber to the home was the first which really allowed the very high speed of going up to 1 gigabit per second. Then cable came also towards that. The copper network does not really reach that speed, but today we can also reach very high speeds with the old twisted pair. But then the mobile networks will catch up, and thanks to 5G, by next year they should also be able to make possible speeds as of 1 gigabit per second or more. So this is the magic triangle of 5G. So in the upper circle you see the enhanced mobile broadband that I have already mentioned. On the left side at the bottom, the massive machine type communications. So it is said that 5G should allow for up to 1 million devices per square kilometer to be connected at the same time. And that is really a lot, and some of these devices will in addition be moving, but that is what will be needed for if we want to have all these smart city applications at the same time. At the right side, at the bottom, you have ultra-reliable and low-latency communications. So this is also a new feature. For critical applications, you need really high reliability. And for a number of applications, for example in e-health, but also in relation to automated driving, you need also low latency. So this is also dramatically improved in comparison to the previous generations of mobile networks. You see that smart city is more to the left at the bottom. It's mainly about machine to machine, but also for cities there may be other applications around smart home, or for example augmented or virtual reality, where in particular you also would need enhanced mobile broadband. It is also important to note that the 5G will allow also network slicing. That means you need not all of these different characteristics for all the applications. So different slices can comply with different quality standards that are really needed for the service that you want to provide. This slide is about the frequencies. You have 3 types of frequencies in Europe, at least, that are identified for 5G. The lower frequencies that are about coverage of the bigger zones. The middle frequencies are about higher speeds, but the coverage is not so big, but you will need it for dense areas in the cities. And then there are even more higher frequencies, the millimeter frequencies, that are then really for smaller zones where you need very high bandwidth. And you need different conditions to be fulfilled. It's important to note that all these antennas of the mobile networks need also to be connected. So you still need fiber or perhaps satellite where fiber is not available to connect the antennas in order for the network to work. I have listed a little bit of applications, but there I think you know most of those that could be for which the 5G network would be very useful. An example could be parking cars remotely. People would leave their car in a zone, and then they would be brought to a free parking spot automatically. I see that my time is over, so I will go to this last slide. For many smart city applications, you do not necessarily need the 5G networks. Some you can rely on narrowband connectivity. For some, a fixed network is the good solution. 4G can also already support high data rates. But if you want to have all these applications at the same time, 5G is really the right solution for the future, because it at the same time enables low latency communications, and with network slicing you can have the different characteristics according to the service that you want to offer. I think the other slides are less relevant, so I thank you very much, and I leave the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you, Pierre. So as the telecommunications technology help us better transmit the data, but how to use data to help us make better solutions or better strategy, let's welcome Joe to give us a speech.
Okay, good afternoon. Thanks very much for having me here. It's getting to the end of the day, and I guess I'm pleased to see you all here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about technology. But it's not really about technology, it's about people. It's about how we interact with technology. People are so obsessed with all of the technologies and how they're developing, and this is really important. But for things to move forward, humans need to understand that technology and need to be able to work with that technology. We've been working very, very hard, and we've been working directly with the United Nations to try and get all of this technology and all of this data which is coming into cities and being able to understand it so humans can make decisions. We are the people who are going to be making these decisions and to moving things forward, and we need to be able to understand this complex data and to work with it. To do this, we've been using smart digital twins. Now, this is a technology that we've developed over the last 15 years in the oil and gas industry, and it's only been the last year that we've suddenly taken this technology over into a new field. So we've started to do this, and we've started to build up digital twins. The first place we did this is in Norway. We started with a small city of Ålesund to test this out, but it's an idea where we can augment and we can overlay data into a city to really have a good understanding of what's going on. So we're working together, as I said, with the UN. We're using this to solve problems, and we're using it, and the way it can solve problems is to have a really good understanding of that data through visualization. The UN has got this program which they have spent the last several years developing, where they go to a city and they actually can find out what is a smart and sustainable city. Most cities you talk to say they're smart, they say they're sustainable, but what is that? The UN has made a program to work this out and to understand this, and they've got a system of key performance indicators, KPIs, to really understand and evaluate how that city is. This takes you to a point where we've got a benchmark, so you know where you are, which is always a good place to start if you want to go forward. You need to know where you are. So you know where you are, but being able to go forward, we need to think about how we can move this forward, and the way we've been looking at this is to pick out individual items. So we've taken every single one of these KPIs and we visualize them into our smart city to understand what's going on. So I'm just going to show you a quick example here. So this visualization here, what we're looking at is response time of emergency services. So we've got the fire brigade, we've got their big data. My pet hate word is big data, I have to say. I hear it mentioned all the time. And every time I hear it mentioned, I go and talk to people, and 99% of the time I talk to people about their big data, they're storing it, and they're not using it for anything. We want to start using that data. If we just use 10% of the big data we're sitting on today, the solutions we could do is incredible. So in this example, we're showing the response time for the emergency services. We're looking at the fire brigade, and we were looking at the relationship between the fire brigade and the traffic, and we realized it wasn't 10 minutes where it should be according to the UN standard, but it was 30 minutes. In Norway, your house is made of wood. In 30 minutes, it's burnt down. That's the end of that. We wanted to look at non-traditional solutions and how we could solve this. So rather than changing the road network or making less vehicles on the road, we looked at what were the trigger points for having this peak flow issue. Because in most cities, you don't have traffic problems 24 hours a day. You've got a peak flow problem. So we looked at how we could solve the peak flow problem. And what we did is we realized if we changed the opening times of schools and daycare, then the people who are working flexi-time don't need to sit in that traffic jam and waste those hours of their lives, and they could go slightly earlier or slightly later because they can deliver their kids at the right time. That made a big difference. We looked at traffic. And we looked at we looked at parking, and we looked at how we could change the parking, take away on-street parking in rush hour, and how we could make it so we quadrupled the price of parking in rush hour times, which meant people who don't want to do those journeys won't do those journeys. We put this together, and the final thing we actually looked at was also garbage collection. I was interested to hear another example of that. So we looked at the garbage collection, and we realized 3 of the garbage routes in this city were going through rush hour traffic, and nobody had thought about it. So we took those out and rerouted those. Changing just 3 small things. So we haven't put a new big road infrastructure in. We haven't changed anything. We halved the response time. what I'm trying to get to here is if we understand what we're working with, if we can share this data between different departments, between different areas, bring it up to a top level, we can suddenly make better decisions, and these are really low-hanging fruit decisions we can look at all of the time. So as I said, we've been chosen, and it's a very early stage, but we've been chosen to be the UN's global partner for simulation program. And I'm going to show you a little video to finish off here, a little bit about what we're working with. So I'm just going to put it onto a little video. Do I have sound? Excuse me?
You see, my
I'll just take it back if that's all right and start from the beginning. Right, here we go, sound.
Let me tell you a story. My dad used to be one of those stressed policymakers. You see, my dad was afraid if a fire were to break out during rush hour, it will be impossible for the firemen to make it in time. And then one day, my dad met this guy who had this really cool technology. This guy showed Dad how he could upload all his piles of existing data to map the effects wind, rain, and temperature would have on the fire. He could even solve traffic jams by knowing where people were moving and changing opening hours of kindergartens and schools so that the fire trucks could move faster. Suddenly, my dad was solving so many of those policy issues that he felt a little bit like a superhero. No, not like that, Dad. Luckily, this little fire of ours has just been another simulation. Okay, guys, let's do it one more time.
Hologram program activated.
Okay, so you can see a little bit of an idea what we're working with. What I want you to finish with, the one takeaway from what you've seen today, and it doesn't mean it needs to be using us, but with the data that you all are working with, we're all working with, start to put it into visual format. Start to put it into a format where it's not built for the machines, but it's built for us. It's built for humans to interact with, and we can start to use that to make decisions. Connect it together, join those dots between different departments, between different people, and I think that all of these goals we want to meet, the sustainability goals, we will be able to meet those if we leverage the technology through people. So let's work together to get to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe's speech. And so here now we have a panel discussion formally. So for a panelist, from all, we have different backgrounds, we have diverse areas, we have different specialties. So in the past several months, or in the past 3 days in the expo, what is the most impressive technology that you have seen at this great World Congress Expo? And also, how do you think that technology could be applied in our smart city development? Yeah, feel free.
Yes. Well, I found out about a tunnel that has been built under the city of L'Aquila, which is in central Italy and had been struck by an earthquake that basically destroyed the city center. And they've put basically all the basic infrastructure like water, internet connection, and electric grid in security within this tunnel. And it means that if another earthquake happens, all the services will be secured, and I hope the city upstairs as well.
Okay, that's a good plan. So, what's your say?
Yeah, I can say I've spent some time walking around the trade fair, and it's really interesting. There's loads and loads of things going on. And I think rather than picking out one individual product, I just wanted to say that it's impressive to see how fast and how quickly the technology is developing. And this technology isn't just technology for the point of technology. It's actually technology to improve people's lives and to make solutions better as we're increasing in population and pushing, as I said, we've got to not get to a point where we are destroying our planet, but actually we're in a sustainable situation. And if we can start to use these technologies and make sure that the politicians and everybody else can move at the same speed as the technologies, I really do think we've got some really positive ways to move forward. So I think the technologies are really moving fast. We need to make sure that decision makers and everybody else can move at that same speed to make us reach those goals.
I will say that the most important thing that I have seen in the past months or here is that we really understood that this is a multi-stakeholder issue. And we have been hearing here mayors, but at the same time the private sector, university, civil society. So I think that's the most smart and great thing that I have been looking around, and that technology is just a tool to really create better places, and that we have to have like an idea of the city that we want to achieve, but it's an idea that we have to really create between these different stakeholders. I think that's the best part of this conference, because some years before we just saw technology and we just saw majors and companies. Now we have a broader conversation, and I think that's very important.
Yes, collaboration matters.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think it's very important to put the people in the center of all this. And we have also, when I was speaking about 5G, we also see that people do not necessarily support a new technology. They have to feel that it is of benefit to them. And speaking of technologies, I think the important point is also that they all work well together. To avoid bottlenecks, to avoid using different technologies, but that at the end they do not really fit, and that the benefits are lost because of that.
Yes, thanks for your sharing. And also, like, let's say when you're back in your childhood, what do you think? Have you ever imagined a digitalized city or a smart city will like, or let's say, what's the biggest difference that you see in the city that you live in right now and the city that you lived in your childhood? So what would be the most amazing part that changed?
Well, I think smartphones made the difference, and that, I mean, that the biggest difference is made by all the technology that you've got in your phone and how that can help you to actually find things in cities.
I will say also internet and all the things that we have because of that. Because remember, when I was little, I'm going to tell you my age with that, but we were seeing, I don't know, shows that were showing that we were going to fly with cars, flying cars and that kind of things. And when you went to Epcot Center at that time, there were more amazing things that you saw. No, what we are living is more realistic, but then more powerful, because we are all connected.
Yes.
Yeah, I also think that all cities have common problems, but there may be also huge differences between cities who have environmental problems, others have more traffic problems. There are cities who are close to the sea, others are in the mountains. So we have also to differentiate for each city to try to find the right solutions for the problems that are there.
I think technology is opening up the world for all the citizens, everybody involved. We can find out things within a few seconds because of our mobile phones and the internet and the different 4G and 5G and everything else. And it means that our lives should be, or a lot of the things in the past which I saw as a child, a lot of those things are now easier. To get a taxi, you press a button on your phone and it's coming. To find out when the buses are going, you press a button. To go to a new city and to find your way around, you take your phone out of your pocket and you look across the city. You can communicate with everybody. You can link up with people. I think the world is becoming smaller, although it's becoming bigger. And I think that the technology is enabling us to go in that direction. We've got to be careful with technology. I think there is huge opportunities with technology, but we need to be steering the technology, and we need to make sure that we know what's going on with artificial intelligence especially, and we need to be looking at the directions of what's going on there. But if we can use it to our advantage, I think we can make a better life quality for as many people as possible, and I think that really has to be the key and the aim for where we're moving with our cities in the future.
Thank you, thank you. So here we comes the Q&A session. If any of you have questions, you can pick up the mic on the aisle. And also tell us your name, where you come from. Anyone? We have quiet audience. Okay. So no questions. Everyone clear what we are talking about? Great. Fantastic. Okay. So thanks for all our panelists. I'm going to wrap up this session. Yes, we are in the Industrial Revolution 4.0, and it is a time of connection. As the market researching company IDC researched by the end of 2018, there are 18 zettabyte data in this world produced by all our past behaviors, including our ancestors. What is 1 zettabyte mean? Let me tell you a smaller unit. 1 exabyte, like all languages, all words that ever spoke by human beings, are 5 exabytes. And 1 zettabyte means 1024 exabyte. That means like 360 Earth's human beings ever spoke. That's massive. That's massive. The data is. So how we deal with the data produced in the past hundreds of years, even thousands of years, and how we deal with the future that 80% of people will live in the urban city, and how we run the city efficiently in the developed city, in the developed countries, and also the developing countries, how we help human beings live better and work better and live happier is the most important topic here at this Congress, and also for our future Congress as well. Thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you the next year. Thank you. Thanks, our panelists. Big applause.